Hey everyone, Tactics here with another Mythic Manaforge Omega boss guide. This time we're going to be taking a look at the Soul Hunters encounter, discussing what is actually changing going into Mythic difficulty, weak auras, and MRT notes set up to make sure that your group is ready to go day one, and then other tips and tricks that we learned over the course of our progression to make yours a bit easier. Of course, I'm going to be posting similar guide videos for both Nexus King and Dementius when my guild gets them down, so make sure you subscribe for that. Plus, I'm going to be streaming all of my progression both here on YouTube and over on my Twitch channel as well, which is linked down below, so stop by and say hi. Otherwise, let's jump straight into the actual changes on this boss fight, where each boss is actually gaining a new ability or amplification to one of their existing abilities. Starting with WeakAuras, the new ability here is called Eradicate, and this is basically just a random target frontal that appears multiple times over the course of each phase. It can be a little bit difficult to see, especially under some of the void puddles and other mechanics going on, and this is actually going to be a common killer of individual players if you do not keep an eye out for it. So it can be especially good to call out any bad frontals, like sometimes it's very close to the boss stack itself or blocking the path if you're running, and so in that case you need to be careful. Good comms on them can be useful. Alyssa Dark Sorrow, the Vengeance Demon Hunter one, the new ability here is Sigil of Chains, and as expected, all it does is grip every single player in the raid to the current tank of Alyssa Dark Sorrow. Now, you don't do anything weird with this in terms of positioning, you just kind of drop it on the boss stack, and in particular this slow can be quite nasty because of the cadence of abilities here. It's consistent, always go Sigil of Chains into Hunt, and so in order to make sure your group can spread out in time and either get back to its soaks or whatever you're doing, it can be good to have a movement speed assigned to every time this goes out, especially something that can cleanse some of these snare effects. Or if you have enough evokers in your group, you can also assign time spirals to kind of this ability cadence here, because it happens just after the boss movement, and so a time spiral can kind of allow people to have movement for the boss moving to wherever WeakAuras jumps to, and then you can also have potentially movement for getting out of these chains when they actually go off. That brings us to Valarin Bloodwraith, who has no new abilities. Instead, the hunt is amplified, and on Mythic difficulty, it now happens 3 times in a row. So you get basically the boss hunts, and then 2 echoes of the boss also do hunts kind of in a staggered 3 cast fashion. And here there's an amplification for 10 seconds when you soak the hunt, so you cannot have the same person soaking multiple times, meaning you need to split your group up here. Now, because this does happen so frequently, immunities are kind of very valuable on this boss encounter specifically, because it allows you to not soak essentially one of the hunts per cast, per trio of the hunt casts, and that is very valuable. It's not necessary though, so it kind of depends on how your comp is built. If you have a lot of those immunities, even things like dispersion, by the way, count as an immunity, then you can assign 2 groups essentially, and then just kind of bet that you're going to be immuning every time, one singular time. But if you want to plan for the worst case scenario, or if your comp is less immune heavy, you can just create 3 groups of players to soak this. Just keep in mind, people that are busy soaking puddles with the dot or one of the tanks, sometimes depending on the cadence of the hunts, won't actually be able to get into these soaks. So in that case, the actual target of the hunt may be taking some more damage. And also, just in general, if you are a target of the hunt and you are not immuning, you probably do need to hit a personal, because the hit is quite large. Now, other than that, the tank mechanics in this first phase have also changed a little bit. So first off, the actual fracture ability, this now shatters 3 souls from the tank instead of 2, which means you have a 100% healing reduction on you while those souls are up and immediately active. So you want to make sure the tank who is swapping immediately taunts Dark Sorrow once Fracture goes out, because that other tank is not able to actually heal themselves at all. Similarly, I-Beam here, the debuff, the Felsinge debuff, now also amps the damage done by Fellblade, which is the dot that goes out immediately following I-Beam on the current active tank. This means that you need to taunt swap mid I-beam cast. The I-beam will not swap targets. The I-beam will continue to hit the current active target, but that puts the Fell Blade on the tank that taunts off, which notably is still dangerous, right? You still do have leftover Felsinge stacks from the previous I-beam, so you need to make sure you pop up personal when you taunt off in this case, but it's only like a couple ticks of the Fell Blade that get amped here on that tank, as opposed to the entire duration if you let it go onto the tank that just took the I-beam. So the taunt timings are a little bit more strict here on Mythic difficulty. Outside of this stuff, the only other new thing is in the intermission here, where in all 3 intermissions, soul tether will now happen, which is basically 3 people in the raid and then 1 group of 2 get tethered together with these chains, and if you ever go 14 yards apart, you kind of snap back together, very similar to the swamp face boss in Operation Floodgate, and you take a bunch of damage. So basically things like blinks, things like leaps, all that stuff is just hard banned in all 3 of the intermissions. And it also means things like move speeds are a lot more valuable, specifically in the 3rd intermission when you're going to be dealing with dodging the fell dev, but I'll talk about that when we get to it later on in the video. Now, in terms of comp stuff, like I said, heavy on the immunes is better. More importantly, though, you want to make sure you have 5 healers. There's quite a bit of damage going out on this encounter, quite a lot of times where you want healing cooldowns available. And so having 5 healers makes this easier, especially as we go further and further into the patch where the DPS check becomes more and more lenient. Speaking of that DPS check, because of the current state of it, where it's, not the most difficult, but still quite challenging to actually meet, stacking ranged DPS, and specifically DPS that can multi-dot or cleave targets that are far away, is also very useful. Things like Warlock, Shadow Priests, right? Those kinds of things. Because for the intermissions, for all 3 of the intermissions, only 1 boss is actually hittable by melee, and meanwhile 2 bosses are floating up above you and they can be cleaved by the multi-dotters. So it's a lot more damage to have that heavier range comp, which is why you're seeing it. This can be nerfed, obviously, later in the patch if that happens. That could adjust how you want to have your comp. They could also just be naturally nerfed by gear and more stacks of the raid buff. So as that happens, the comp restrictions in terms of your DPSers becomes less and less important. That being said, things like immunity is still important. Things like having 5 healers is still very important. Okay, from there, let's talk a little bit about the WeakAuras here. As always, you can use Northern Sky, you can use Liquid, both work. We use the Liquid pack. In terms of how it works, the Northern Sky actually has a description here. Here it is. So basically, one, a Dispel WeakAura kind of notifies people when you need to be dispelled to move your debuff to a new player, because on Mythic, basically, you have 3 packs of Dispel teams, essentially, which are passing that debuff around to actually ensure that they clear and also don't get murdered by Adaris hitting them over and over again. This aura in particular also kind of notifies the healer, right? Because it's a private aura when exactly they want to be dispelled. We kind of solve that in a way of putting a healer in each of the groups. Actually, I can show you the groups that we have as well. So it's like this. We have, attack ping group. So they bound the attack ping specifically. And so this whole group knew if the attack ping was going off, that was someone in their group. Warning ping was the next group, and then assist ping was the final group. And again, a healer in each of these groups, they were responsible for getting their group's dispels when the timer for the dispels was going off, which again is one of the WeakAuras. It kind of tells you, hey, you need to swap your dispel now. And so when that happens, the person with it actively, so like if it was the first dispel, would be, in this case, Banshee would do attack ping on himself. Powerhouse would do attack ping on himself. They'd get together, and then the healer would actually dispel them once the macro gets pressed. And that would be how all 3 groups are functioning. Now, this obviously can get a bit clustered with, the range doing various things like soaking hunt, avoiding frontals on the ground, all that stuff. Basically, it was the responsibility of the people not with pings over their head to move away from players that are pinging on their head. If you are next to someone with an attack ping on their head, that is a bad idea, because that means they're trying to transfer their debuff to someone. And if you are blocking that, that's your problem, right? That is your fault. So that is another reason to have these pings. If you see a ping near you, you need to move away. Going back to the other stuff, there is a hunt assignment. It's even disabled by default. We didn't use a specific WeakAura for this. We just kind of assigned general groups, and it was just like whoever was actually there and could get into it. Because like I said, one, if there's anyone actually actively soaking at this moment, the Dispel Soak, they're not going to be able to get into these hunts, and they shouldn't get into these hunts, to be clear, because they're already taking extra damage from WeakAuras. Two, depending on the order of the melee soak, it may be that the tank can't actually get into it because they need to be positioning in a certain way to drop their souls in a good spot, and obviously the frontal as well following that. So they are hit or miss if the tank is able to actually get in there. So another thing to consider. So it's kind of like a general guideline. And again, specifically for us as well, we had the 3 groups set in case it needed to happen. But obviously, if an immune happened first or second, then everyone in this group knows that they are free to soak either the melee or the ranged one. And so these soakers just kind of distributed themselves into those other hunts, because we did kind of assume we were going to get at least 1 immunity every set because we were pretty heavily stacked on immunities. Just double checking, I think that was all of the WeakAuras. Oh, there's a tether assignments as well. So this basically, again, is an automatic WeakAura. It doesn't need any setup, except you do need to put markers down on the ground correctly. Basically, just you start, you know, as a clock and just go around basically 7 markers for the intermissions, because there's going to be 7 groups of players that are tethered together. Each of them are going to be assigned one of the markers. So it essentially forces your raid to be spread out, assigned a specific position. And that is particularly useful for intermissions 1 and 2, where you need to spread out to soak, or you need to spread out to make sure blaze lines are separated and not all stacked into one area, right? So that can be useful. Make sure you're dropping the corresponding raid markers. I believe they're almost exactly the same, but the liquid pack uses skull instead of red. So that is just almost the same. So whichever one you're using, make sure you drop the right markers. And it's just in a circle around the room. I believe here you want star and orange to be where the bosses are actually flying up during the intermission. Maybe we'll actually get an image of it of ours here real quick. I'm not sure how useful this is, but yeah, this is the picture we took post boss fight. Just so, again, you want to try and make sure that the star and orange in particular, which is likely where a lot of the multi-daughters are going to be assigned with the WeakAura logic, is near where the bosses are hanging out in the intermission, so they can multi-dot for that extra damage. Now, we can get into the boss fight here, where we'll talk about the phases first. I think I'm probably going to talk about the tank stuff specifically first. So if you're not interested in the tank stuff, just check the chapters. You can skip ahead. But basically, the tank stuff here is a bit different than the normal and heroic strategy. So like I said, there's going to be 3 souls here. So basically, the strategy with Alyssa Dark Sorrow, which is the fracture ability, is you want it to be faced directly at the edge of the circle, as they kind of can't go outside the circle. So it forces them to group up on the edge of the circle. As you're going to see, boom, they're all nicely spread out. If you would face the other way, they would be sent like back to these far back range. But because this outer circle is here stopping them, it puts them right here. Taunt off is immediately after it goes out, because of course this tank cannot heal themselves whatsoever. And in terms of soaking priority, we did have kind of general assignments for this. So the other tank, the one that just taunted off, is going to be soaking this middle one and pointing the I-beam down the middle one. So that's always where the I-beam is going to be pointed. So they're going to be getting this. And then we had melee DPS assigned to get these left and right ones. Then we had like our Demon Hunter and I want to say our Windwalker assigned to one side. And then we had our Rogue and I believe an Evoker assigned to the other side, just to make sure that, hey, someone's always looking to get these soaks. Now, after intermission, this is going to be a little bit different. I'll talk about that in a second, but you'll need someone to also cover this middle soak as well. I-beam's going to go out here, like I said, pointed down the middle. Make sure you are ready, and I'm taunting here mid I-beam. You see the I-beam doesn't move. The animation moves at the end, but nothing actually happens. I got 0 stacks, and this way I get the Fell Blade, and the tank with all the stacks does not. Now, again, this is very scary outside of the first one, because every other time the I-beam is going off, both tanks have stacks. So specifically, when you are taunting off Valarin and getting the Fell Blade beyond the very first one of the fight, you need to do it with the defensive. I even did it with the defensive anyways, just, you know, good muscle memory. But the first several ticks, like I think it's like 2 or 3 ticks of the Fell Blade, do hurt a lot because you have the amp. Do not be fooled by that one. Going forward though, like Void Step, we're just following the boss around. I can show you the next POV of the I-beam. Like I said, he soaks there. I get the middle one quickly. It can be weird like that. Actually, it's a good example of it. Sometimes it's a little weird where, you know, that bounces up towards the bosses a little bit. A couple things to note with this. One, obviously you need to dip into it, but sometimes it bugged out where if you are in the circle preemptively, it actually doesn't soak it. You need to exit the circle and move back into the circle. So keep that in mind. And then also this I-beam tank is taking a ton of damage, by the way, because you just soaked a dot. So you have the soak dot. You are getting this I-beam stacking up on you. And then also, depending on your taunt timing as well, you're getting Alyssa smacking you in the face as well. So something to be aware of there. I think I even taunted a little slow there, but it can be quite scary as well. So something to keep in mind. There's that frontal. Like I said, it was almost impossible to see that frontal. I'll point out this more later on, but like the frontals are extremely dangerous. Like this is a frontal right here. Now, I mentioned again for tank stuff, after the intermissions, there is some stuff going on. So we're going to fast forward here to immediately after the first intermission. So WeakAuras is going to be in the middle always in the first intermission. We're trying to maximize our cleave. And so what we need to do here, because the tank combo happens immediately after the intermission, is the Alyssa tank basically is going to have the tank face WeakAuras instead of the outside. That's going to spawn our souls over here. And then I'm going to have Alyssa and Valarin stack up near WeakAuras and point the frontal to where Alyssa was. We are calming, hey, this marker is dangerous. That's where the I-beam is going because this is a little bit different. And this is just to optimize cleave. So you can see the fracture goes out. I taunt the boss, bring him towards the middle, and I face away the I-beam towards where we called it, which in this case is the star puddle. And this gives us better cleave here. It even could have been a little bit closer probably if we had been a little faster, but that's just to optimize cleave because WeakAuras doesn't move, right? And WeakAuras is always going to be in the middle after intermissions. So we do our tank positioning a little bit differently in that sense. And again, you need someone to back up this soak here because obviously with the I-beam going this way, I am not going to be able to get that, right? Someone else has to get it. And so in this case, yeah, I think our evokers do a lot more of these soaks in general. Demon Hunter jumped out there, right? So keep that in mind. You do need an extra soaker for just the time the tank buster happens after the intermission. Now, we've yapped about tanks. Let's go back here and talk about everyone else. So no hunt off the bat here. The hunt doesn't happen until the movement goes out. You do see our dispel groups, right? They each soaked off the top, the circles, the first person, and now they're waiting for the void step, which is where all the puddles go out, and this is where, you know, the work starts happening. The WeakAuras is going to pop up at some point and kind of tell you when you need to actually swap your debuff, so keep an eye on that. It is a set timer, so you can kind of learn it, and it's not too bad. When this pull in, all this stuff happens here, this is where you want to have speeds. Time spiral is also up here. We have the Windrush totem. So we're going with that. We're respreading out, and you can see the hunts happen right out of this soak. And so we have, you know, our raid leader calling out, seeing who is targeted by the soak, and he's either calling immune, melee, or ranged in that order. So the first person that got picked was someone with an immune. It's a Shadow Priest with Dispersion. They got called to immune it. If that was someone without an immunity, they would 10 out of 10 times be called to make the melee line. That is always just a consistency in the comms. When you get gripped in, if you are a non-immune player, like an Evoker, like a Warlock, that kind of thing, do not immediately leave melee, because if you get targeted by Hunt, you need to make the melee line, and it can be very awkward if you immediately port out. Now, after this first one, you always know the second player, since this wasn't immune, is going to be melee. The third player is going to be range. So we see this line getting made giant over here, being brought a little bit closer to the melee for the melee group to soak it. Boom, we soak it. And then similarly, this one's made long out in the range. Make these lines as long as possible. Again, the frontals are going out here at the same time, so it can be quite scary if you have a short line and just gets eaten up by the entire frontal. And then this is just kind of a rinse and repeat, right? The bosses just kind of do the same thing. We're getting pulled in again, and the cadence is the exact same. The boss moves, Sigil of Chains happens, hunts go out, and that is it. Just copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. So just be ready for that. And again, this one goes out. First one, not an immune soak, so we get the melee players, etc. This is actually a danger moment here. Be very, very careful. This is two people stacked up on each other, I'm pretty sure, and I see it kind of at the last second and try and step out. But they do get cleaved on top of each other. The circles take a second to appear, and so it's very, very scary. You take a lot of damage if you're stacked. It's very important to not be stacked, because you just get absolutely wombo comboed like that. Also, again, if you want to see what the dispel thing looks like here, I mean, I have a couple warnings on my screen here. This is when the dispels are going off. I think this is dispel 2 going to dispel 3. Yeah, I believe this is the second people in each set actually. So again, you're transferring this pretty quickly. There are weak auras that give you warnings. You can attach sounds and stuff to it. Obviously, mine doesn't have sounds on it. I don't even know why I have 2, to be honest with you. But this is what the weak aura kind of looks like. And then you'll see probably like a lot of spam pinging going out. If I can get an angle of it, maybe. The spells, yeah, here like the pings start going out. They start pinging each other. They get to their partner. They get the dispel off. Boom. And then the transfer is complete. So that is how that functionally works, right? Once you start getting the weak aura, start spamming your pings. If you're one of the 2 people involved in that swap, press the macro whenever, whenever you're actually in a safe spot, and then your healer assigned to you will get that dispel. Now, this is the start of the intermission. So you can see here, immediate play on square. So I'm going to take a look, and you kind of want to go quickly. So don't worry too much about milking damage here. See, we start moving here, and an important thing to identify fairly early is, are we a range stack or are we a melee stack? So if you're a range stack, it can actually be very beneficial to play towards the outer side of your marker. Obviously, again, you can get multi-dotting out, but also because for the Blaze intermission, it is so much safer to play out here than it is to play in the middle. Now, obviously, if you're a melee stack or if you have melee in your group, you need to play a little bit towards the middle a bit, because obviously they need to be able to hit this one boss that they can hit. But yeah, that's just kind of identify that. I think it often tries to pair the tanks together in this phase. So I'm usually with the other tank. And in that case, right, you're trying to soak here as much as possible. Tanks obviously are able to soak a lot. AMS is able to soak a lot. Remember, though, you are not trying to commit immunities here. It's also kind of hard to do that because you can't do like a sweep across the room because you're bound to other people. And so you're just kind of soaking as orbs come in. And the melee around the boss are playing goalie kind of a bit beyond their marker even. Whereas the range, if they're further out, I think, do we have any? We don't have any super far out range groups here. We got like one over here. But, you know, you're trying to play goalie as best you can. Watch your stacks. Anyone who's not a tank probably doesn't want to go above 2 stacks if they can help it. Tanks are able to probably, I think I went to like 5 stacks one pull. Yeah, I mean, this might literally be the pull where I go to 5 stacks. Yeah. Like I watched this. I was gonna take it if needed. Like I do pop a, I made my cloak procs here, and then I don't need to pop a defensive on it. But like tanks can go to 5 stacks pretty comfortably. Everyone else is in danger if they go above 2 stacks. You can do a 3rd stack with a personal, but again, try and keep it to 2 stacks. Let other people soak, especially if you identify that the tanks are near you. We called out where the tanks were playing on whenever this intermission happened, the first intermission specifically. And then those people near that marker kind of knew, okay, I can soak a little bit less because we've got 2 people here soaking up a ton of the orbs. Now we're going back into the boss phase. Like I said, there's the weird initial tank combo just to make sure we optimize cleave. And otherwise, the exact same with void step happening shortly after. And then the exact same cadence, like I mentioned, repeating as we've seen throughout the encounter. In terms of healing cooldowns, these healing absorbs applied by the Spirit Bomb are nasty, and part of why you have 5 healers is to ensure you have coverage on this. Actually, Lorgs is a great website I will always recommend. You know what, if you're like a preservation evoker, whatever, mythic difficulty, go to Soul Hunters, right? This is a great way to figure out where you should put your healing cooldowns, where are other people putting their healer cooldowns, and it's essentially a lot of this is for coverage on a lot of these Spirit Bomb casts to make sure you have something every single time. And so that is my advice for if you're trying to figure out, okay, how exactly we're going to do our healing cooldowns. You need coverage on these Spirit Bombs. That is the #1 thing. Otherwise, go look at Lorgs. It's not really my area of expertise. Now, not a ton to talk about here with the boss phase. I'm going to fast forward to the next intermission just real quick. Surely it'll happen anytime. Here it is, Metamorphosis. So again, you get the assignment where you should relatively play. Identify if you're heavy range. If you're a full range comp, you can chill even like out here. And it's like not even that bad. You can see like how sparse it is out there compared to melee, which is kind of hell. Tank privilege right now, you can kind of hang out. If you are not a tank and you have a second line overlapping you and you can't run along your line towards your chain partners to avoid it, you need to press a personal because double lines is an easy way to die here. Obviously, tank privilege, I like don't move this entire phase basically. Woo, let's go. But in general, dodging towards your line partners is what you want to do here. Because like we're already like a pretty hyperextended chain right now because I'm with 2 range players, I believe, in this case. So just keep that in mind. It can be a little bit spooky if you're like a melee with ranged, because if you dodge in the wrong direction, then you get snapped towards your partners. Not only is that extra damage, but you're also moving your blaze line at the last second, which is a hard no-no, right? You want to keep these as planned as possible, which is why dodging along this line is the ideal thing to do. Then we got Intermission 3, which is very easy to die in. Let's go to that quickly. Here it is. So two things. One, you want 2 different movement speed, group movement speed abilities, whether that's, Windrush Totem, Stampeding Roar. I don't even know what else it is, but maybe those are the only 2 ones that I can think of off the top of my head. But 2 group movement CDs available for this intermission. Once it starts, everyone needs to move a little bit more towards the center of the arena here, because you don't know exactly where this first sleep is going to be. When it goes out, you need to calm a movement as a group and go together to avoid this frontal. So again, we did this with a movement speed. So this is where movement speed number 1, I believe we have a Stampeding Roar that's about to go out here. And we will always calm. I think we go towards, I think calm left or right, whatever. Yeah, it doesn't matter. As long as you calm something and everyone follows that calm, you have one voice, and that will get you to dodge this frontal with minimal issues. At this point, the boss is always going to leap away from your group. So boom, they're gone. We don't chase the boss. Melee uptime, not important. We stay here and we outrange it. That is always our calm. Boom. Then you will need your second movement speed. Once this ends, you're going to step a little bit towards the middle here, because you can kind of get screwed depending on where the actual jump lands exactly. So you're going to see us inch a little bit towards the middle with speed. And then we're going to call our positioning here. I think we're going to go left here. And again, as long as you move with the group with a movement speed, it's just like the first one. You can easily get out of the way. The boss is going to pick a random player, do the frontal, and we're able to get out squeaky clean. We have a Spirit Link thrown down there just in case as well. And then this goes into the last phase, which is different timing wise. So an important note on the last phase, right off the top, you're going to get only the tank fracture, no I-beam, and that's going to be immediately followed by your hunt soaks. So it's a little weird. Just beware. Be ready for this. Be ready to have your set of hunt soaks again. Other thing to note on the immunity front, like I said, we prioritized one singular immunity for the first 2 boss phases. As soon as you get to the 3rd boss phase, which is right before this intermission, and then this boss phase right before the Enrage, you can send as many immunities as you have. So if you get 3 players with an immunity picked for a hunt, they have their immunity ready to go and available, you can just immune all 3 hunts in this last phase, right? You don't want to overdo it early on, because that can affect your ability to have 1 immunity in every hunt set early on. But at the end of the fight, you can kind of just blow any remaining immunes as needed to reduce general group damage. So keep that in mind. Is your general goal here, if you are planning to play in the Enrage, we like kill it basically as the Enrage starts or shortly after it. But the whole goal is to kill Alyssa just before the Enrage starts, which is it's starting here in 5 seconds. We want Alyssa dead. You cannot deal with the Fel Dev in the Enrage. You will die. After that, the goal is to kill Adaris like 5 seconds or so into the actual Enrage as well. Again, we're going to kill the boss really early here because of our damage, but you want Adaris done like 5 seconds from now. So like at 7:10ish, you'd want Adaris to be dead as well, because you want to kill him essentially before any of the soaks get too close to him. So you're forced to soak them. And then that would leave you with Valarin, who's allowed to be the highest, who you would kill at the end. Last here, everyone's still going to be getting hunts. And you're going to be taking the pulsing damage, and it's kind of a race to kill Valarin before you get overwhelmed by the pulsing damage and the actual Fel Rushes going out. And the more damage you have, the more gear we have, the more seconds the raid buff we have, the less likely you are to play much of this Enrage, if at all. But that is how you would do it if you had to play it. But there we have it, guys. That is Soul Hunters on Mythic. Hopefully this helps you and your guild out. If it does, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more guide content like it, not only for Nexus King and Dimensions, but also beyond into the Midnight expansion. As always, I need to take a moment to thank all of my Patreons for making videos like this possible. Thanks to their support. Otherwise, appreciate everyone for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.